I think within the CrossFit community, people have this sort of binge, guilt, starve cycle. So, Friday hits, it's been a long week at work, and they're going to hammer a couple of beers, just eat whatever they want, wake up Saturday, kind of de-stress again from the weekend. And then Sunday, they wake up and they think, man, I've been way over what I'm supposed to be doing here. And they start to restrict dramatically, helping people kind of break out of that cycle and say, hey, listen, you don't need to starve yourself, 24/7 for 10 months of the year. Like, there's a different way that we can go about this.
Welcome to the Complete Athletic Performance Podcast. Alongside my coach and mentor, Brandon Petersen, I'm Chris Anderson, and we're here to share our thoughts on CrossFit, training, nutrition, health, and more. Today's episode is with Mike Molloy, the founder and CEO of M2Performance Nutrition, who's here to talk to us about sleep, food, stress, and all sorts of things that are make you maximize your performance and your life. So I think we should start with this origin story, because I heard there was an origin story to M2Performance Nutrition, like how you got started. And I want to hear, Mike, your perspective
I'm taking it personal, because I told Chris, I'm like, I used to have a shutout somewhere. And then I looked and I'm like, damn it, that whole section is gone.
Well, yeah, well, to be fair, I used to write on my personal webpage, where the blog was. And then I let that lapse because I was, writing for the M2 blog page. And so one day I went to go look at it and it was just gone. And I was like, well, shit. Anyways, all right, yeah. So, where does M2Performance all start? So, I had kind of gotten into nutrition coaching, honestly, from sort of selfish origins. So, I got into CrossFit pretty early on, right around 2008 or so, and with 2009, started to do some competitions that now look so small by comparison, and started to play around with nutrition and looking at ways to dial things in. I have a background with a PhD in immunology, which, it has some nutritional value, but more so it just kind of teaches me how to evaluate good science from crap science. And so using that background, I started to look into, best practices. Took a couple of detours down some other rabbit holes, but eventually kind of led up to the concept of, we're putting out a good amount of energy training, and we're, as a community, doing a pretty poor job of supporting that. And so started to work with individuals on their nutrition, probably more from a health point of view. Started running some seminars around the New Hampshire area, Massachusetts, maybe one down in Connecticut. And geez, maybe this is like 4 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer. Brandon reached out to me and said, hey, we're running this athlete camp here at Free for the weekend. Would love if you could just do a quick chalk talk on nutrition. Sure, of course, would love to. And so came down, and everybody at that time was pretty much low carb, paleo, etc. And I get up there and I'm like, listen, you guys are putting out a ton of glycolytic work. Like, we need to support that with food, and specifically carbohydrates, to maximize your performance. And I threw up some numbers on the board, which was if you're doing 2 to 3 hours of training as a 140-pound female, you should probably be eating somewhere in the order of 300 grams of carbohydrates. And if you're a guy, at least somewhere in the range of 400. And I think everybody's jaw hit the floor. And I was like, what is this fool talking about? But after that talk, this woman walks up to me and she says, hey, I just went to regionals. I didn't really have the experience I was looking for. Would love for some help with my nutrition. I said, sure, here's my email. Just shoot me a message sometime. And that turned out to be Tasia Prasevich, who of course trained with Brandon for a long time. So worked with her for a year, kind of trying to support her with all of the training that she was doing with Brandon. She started to do really, really well. I would say mostly because of her effort and Brandon's, but people, especially women within the CrossFit community, love to talk about nutrition. So, people started asking her, hey, what are you doing when you're podiuming at all these, throwdowns and Wadapalooza and stuff like that? And so she introduced me to Kenzie Riley. Mackenzie introduced me to Carly Fuhr, to Nicole Holcomb, and then this whole thing started to kind of spiral from there. And it went from me kind of helping a few people locally to, next thing you know, working with 20 CrossFit Games athletes and, having a company with 15 coaches and, over 500 clients around the world. So that's the really short story, but kind of relating it back to my relationship with Brandon and kind of how it all got started.
So was it your love of CrossFit that led you to focus on CrossFitters? Because have you branched out to? Cause I think some of your testimonials are people from other walks of fitness and sport.
Yeah, I mean, so I started thinking about nutrition for my own performance within CrossFit and started to apply that with other people within the sport. But that who we work with has definitely begun to diversify over the last year or so. We've worked with level 10 gymnasts at Division I programs. We worked with weightlifters on the U.S. Junior national team. We started to bridge more into some traditional sports like soccer. So we have, I think, as of currently 4 women that compete on various national teams that will likely be in the Olympics and the World Cup. And then we've got some Division I athletes across different sports, from track and field to football, a couple of hockey players and things like that. So definitely beginning to branch out, but I would still say that the core heart of who we work with are CrossFitters, athletes and non-athletes, to be honest with you, people that are just looking to improve their health or look better naked.
Are there certain misconceptions that come up over and over again for people? Are there certain problems or issues that you find yourself consistently addressing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So things have evolved over the last couple of years dramatically. A couple of years ago, I would say 85 to 90% of the people that came to us were undereating pretty substantially, or at least as they reported it. I think within the CrossFit community, people have this sort of binge, guilt, starve cycle. So, Friday hits, it's been a long week at work, and they're going to hammer a couple of beers, they just eat whatever they want, wake up Saturday, kind of de-stress again from the weekend. And then Sunday they wake up and they think, man, I've been way over what I'm supposed to be doing here. And they start to restrict dramatically. And so by the time they get to, Friday again, they've been in a pretty steep calorie deficit while training relatively intensely, probably dealing with either kids, a job, or a significant other, stress on top of that. And then the whole cycle repeats itself. And so, helping people kind of break out of that cycle and say, hey, listen, you don't need to starve yourself, 24/7 for 10 months of the year. Like, there's a different way that we can go about this. So it's definitely an eye-opening experience. So that was probably one of the bigger trends. And, I think it's starting to get better. People are starting to recognize that they need to fuel their body, but it definitely still is a problem out there.
Do you find people that you work with, saving their macros, trying to structure their week to be able to have, certain meals that are more appealing and maybe a little bit more on the caloric side?
Yeah. So we actually literally just put up an Instagram post on basically what we call macro hoarding. And so there's basically 2 different types of versions of what you're talking about. So, one could be, hey, I'm worried about going to bed hungry, or I want to have, I want to just destroy half a pizza tonight. So I'm going to basically not eat anything for the rest of the day. There's there's a little things wrong with both of those approaches for sure. But to answer your question, yeah, we definitely see people kind of trying to game the system every once in a while to kind of, maybe have something that doesn't necessarily fit the lifestyle that they're looking for. And, honestly, as a nutrition coach, in a once in a while thing, I don't really care, right? Like, if you're one of my clients and you've been, working hard for 30 days and you say, hey, I want to go out to, dinner with my wife. I want to go get some, Thai food, and I'm going to have a full plate of, pad Thai and a Thai iced tea, and they'll probably have a piece of dessert. Go for it. You know what I mean? The bigger problem becomes when, you're saying to yourself, I'm hungry, but I don't want to feel hungry. I'm not going to tell my nutrition coach because I'm afraid he's going to increase my macros. So I'm just going to try to save as many calories as I can for the end of the day. And I'll eat all of those right before I go to bed so I can sleep through the night. That's a problem. That's a bigger problem.
I also saw a post on your Instagram about, preparing people for the open. And is there anything right now people need to be considering as they are, in the beginning of many of them for their competitive season?
Yeah. So the whole sport of CrossFit has dramatically changed. Um, and so it kind of comes down to who we're talking about. So if you're the average person at, CrossFit Free who's doing the open, essentially they want to get, as good a score as they can get. Realistically, we just need to make sure that you look at this period of time as a relatively stressful 5 weeks, and something that you're going to want to try to dial in your nutrition. You're going to want to eat well. This is not the time to worry about losing, 5 pounds. This is the time to say, hey, I'm going to, weight maintenance is the goal, and I'm going to really focus hard on performance and try to maximize that. I'm going to focus on my sleep, right? So sleep is probably the most important thing we can do, even above and beyond nutrition. And so I'm going to make sure that as many nights of the week as I can, I'm going to get 8 hours a night of sleep. And if that's not possible Monday through Friday because of work, then I'll try to make up for it as best I can on the weekend. And then, managing other stress, right? Like we were just talking about, people have a tendency to lose their mind a little bit around the CrossFit Open. And so,
For real, definitely.
yeah, so trying to find other ways just to, any other stresses in your life that you can put off. If your goal is to do as well as you can, like that's going to do nothing but benefit you. Now, if we're talking more about sort of like an elite athlete population, people that are looking about going to the CrossFit Games or then, heading off soon to one of the new sanctionals, it's a bit of a different story, right? Like, your training volume is fairly dramatically increased, and you have a decision to make. Are you likely to finish top 20 in the Open, or win your national championship? In that case, then maybe it's worth kind of going, pushing all of your chips into the CrossFit Open, making sure that each attempt really is as dialed in as possible. Your nutrition obviously needs to support that as well. But if you're getting ready for one of these sanctionals, like we've got to get a bigger picture in mind. So, thinking of those workouts as sort of one and done, prepping for them just like you would any other workout nutritionally, and then kind of moving on with the rest of the week is sort of the goal. So again, at the end, so much of nutrition, the answer is it depends. And that's just the answer for the situation as well.
What's interesting to me, it's to hear a nutrition specialist talk about the importance of two other things, sleep and stress. Can you talk a little bit about some strategies or some things you talk about with your clients? Maybe one secret, if you don't mind, about how to improve sleep, how to make sure they're maximizing their sleep.
Yeah. I don't know necessarily it's a secret, but there are definitely some things that we've identified over the time that leads to better quality sleep. And really what we're looking for is sleeping from the time that you go to bed to the time you're ready to get up in the morning with as few wake ups as possible. Ideally 0, but more realistically, we were pretty happy with 1 per night. So things that we were looking to do, one would be minimizing exposure to blue light, so computers, TV, cell phones, and things like that, before you get to bed. So there's this really great book by Matthew Walker. He's a sleep professor from out in California, and he talks about a study in that book where 1 hour of screen time delays the production of melatonin, which is a fairly critical sleep hormone, by 3 hours and decreases its production by 50%. So, if you're trying to go to bed at 10 o'clock and you're on your phone right up until 10, well, realistically, your body's not going to produce the melatonin it needs to until roughly 1 a.m., right? Wow. So you're basically on California time at that point. So, just helping people recognize that and saying, hey, like, I want you to set an alarm on your cell phone for 9 o'clock if your goal is to go to bed at 10. And when that alarm goes off at 9 p.m., laptop goes off, phone goes away, start getting yourself ready for tomorrow. Maybe that involves, prepping up your gym bag, getting your, your supplements and your protein shake and all that stuff ready. Go read a book, take a shower, and just kind of mentally start to unwind from the day so that when you get in bed, you really are ready for sleep and not spending 3 hours kind of actually getting there. So that's one big trick that we use with people.
You mentioned supplements. Kind of where do you stand on that? I'm sure it's very individualized, right? Depending on your, which client or person you're working to. But is there something generally that you think is information people would need about supplementation?
Yeah, absolutely. So the broad message is that supplementation will never be a replacement for adequate sleep, adequate nutrition, and appropriately dosed training. But if you're doing all of those things already and you want to try to take things to the next level, or if there's one area that's sort of deficient for other reasons like work or just life, then supplementation can be a valuable resource. So 2 good examples. and your general sort of client population would be omega-3 supplementation and vitamin D. So, you guys are both New England based. We're still just about kind of coming out of the doldrums of winter.
Thank God.
Yeah. Other than like the roughly like 12 inches of my face that gets exposed to sun, like really, I haven't seen much for a long time here. Your skin is responsible for producing vitamin D, which is a critical sort of, modulator of the entire body, from the immune system to, bone health to, thyroid and adrenal function. And so supplementing that with, a solid vitamin D supplement throughout the winter, something in the order of 1,000 to 2,000 units per day, can just sort of help in that situation. At the same time, something like omega-3s, ideally you wouldn't need them. Ideally, you would eat wild caught fish 1 to 2 times a week, have a grass-fed beef, diet for the rest of your protein and things of that nature. But the reality of the situation is that, most of us don't have the financials to make that happen. And so we're eating, generic grain-fed beef from the store, farm-raised fish. And so as a result of that, we're exposed to a little bit higher omega-6 levels than, maybe we want to. And so one way to combat that, is to supplement with a solid omega-3 supplement, good EPA, DHA ratios in there to try to make up for a deficiency in our diet. So those are just 2 examples that would apply to pretty much every person. Beyond that, it's going to kind of come down to individual specifics. What are your goals? What's your training volume? And, kind of where are you in your nutritional journey?
You mentioned earlier too about this idea of stress, how everybody gets kind of stressed during the open season.
Yeah.
Never.
And I feel like everybody does. It doesn't matter if you're super competitive and you're aspiring to, the next level of the competition, or you're just somebody that really likes CrossFit and appreciates the community that comes up through the open.
Right.
Everybody feels that stress. So what do you suggest people do to combat that stress and try to reduce it as much as possible?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I think I saw more wall balls being flung across my gym in one day in the first week than I have in like the rest of my time in that gym. What can we do to combat stress? So there's a couple things that we use with our clients. But probably the best one, the one that's been most effective for us, is like a 5-minute journal at the end of the day. So this is not something that's unique to M2, but something that I think a lot of smart people are doing, which is, listen, there's all these thoughts that are bouncing around in your head all day long, and as a result of it, we tend to have sort of cyclical thoughts, while we're trying to go to sleep, or even throughout the rest of the day. And so taking 5 minutes and just free writing, it doesn't have to be Shakespeare. It can just be literally run-on sentences about what you're thinking in that moment, getting them out of your head onto paper, and then you can either save those and go back and laugh at them a couple days later, or you can kind of like tear them out and throw them away and kind of be done with it for the day. That's just one sort of way to like literally physically manifest your stress onto an object and then remove it from your life. That's worked really, really well for us.
I never thought of that, but actually I've heard about that. People would like crumple up the paper and throw it away, and it's sort of like, putting it behind you. It's a good way to
cathartic.
You get that 5-minute journal now. That's actually like a legit, like on Amazon. It's pretty, we all have them as well, but I mean,
they sell them.
I've enjoyed it very much, honestly. I think Tasia, she had it back when she was up with us, and I think I had started it, brought like 3 home for the girls, and Lynn kind of had the whole household do it. But it's as for as simple as it is, the what you get in return, you kind of have to experience it, as silly as that sounds. But
it's easier. I'm happy to hear that you did that, Brandon, because I honestly, not to sound biased, but it's easy to get women to buy into these types of things, and sometimes it's a little bit harder to get the boys to sit down and write about their feelings at the end of the day. But
I haven't had a huge success rate with it. I've put it out there, but not everyone's taking it. So
honestly, they need it as much, if not more, than the ladies, just because they're even less likely to talk about it with a friend comparatively to women, in my experience. Not to be overly generalizing.
No, agreed.
I did one that was like a gratitude journal. So you'd start off the day like sort of what you're grateful for, and then you come back and reflect on that. So I've done that one before.
That's a great one as well, man. Just finding things every day that's good in life. That kind of helps put any of the rest of the stress in perspective when when things go a little bit sideways, whether it's at the gym or in the rest of your day. There are things that are out there that are worth continuing to kind of push for every day.
Brandon, you had a question about challenges?
Yeah, I want
Nutrition
I want
challenges?
to touch base on this. Something I was gonna reach out to you anyway, Mike,
Sure.
as it progressed, but I figured we'll touch on it here. So obviously, I think it's tough to put into context the conversations I've had with you in the last, I don't know, literally 8 years. But I know
Sure.
we've discussed nutritional challenges at gyms. I know I've always leaned on you in some of ours in the past. We've changed it up so much.
Yeah.
We recently did one, I want to say, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago. It was by far our most successful, and it was also by far our most simplest approach from years prior. But I wanted to get your take if you have seen or ever laid one out, for instance, that you found to be much more successful when you are, in fact, presenting it to a large group instead of just
Completely.
more of the macro approach or a singular approach to a client, instead of saying, "Hey, this is the broad approach," and I'll discuss ours and what we did and get your opinion. But I was curious if you
Sure.
had an idea or something you've seen work really well, or maybe you have yourself have rolled one out.
Yeah. So let me start off by saying kind of what we've seen sort of not work, which is sort of the broad sort of elimination challenges that are thrown out there. So, hey, 30 days or 40 days of, um, no gluten, no dairy, no alcohol, and those things can produce pretty darn good results for 30 days, especially in a generic community where people really haven't been paying attention to that. But honestly, I'm not really interested in your 30-day results. Like, I want to know what people look like 30 days after that. And so, I think providing a simple message for like a broad community, which is like, hey, listen, this is what your plate should look like 3 meals of the day. We'll say 5 to 6 days of the week. So maybe that's a piece of protein roughly the size of your hand, a cup or roughly the palm of your hand worth of dense carbohydrates like rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, bread, gasp. Filling the rest of that plate with vegetables and putting a little bit of healthy fats on top. You can generate a ton of results if you can just get your population to kind of buy into that sort of very, very simple approach to things. So yeah, that's sort of what I've seen work the best. We run macro based challenges with gyms. Yes and no. There has to be accountability built into it, right? Like, so many people are not really internally structured to generate their own sort of accountability. But if they're doing it for somebody else, then they'll do it, way more effectively. So I hope I explained that okay.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, and we definitely went that route where
Mm-hmm.
back in the day it was almost like the Whole30, kind of like that, those, cut out everything. And again, like you
Yep.
said, you can see substantial changes in that time frame, but the sustainability, at least even for myself or many others, is not usually going to be there to that level. So
Right.
we went our most recent one, and I believe there was actually a gym out west. I don't know if it was New England. There was there was a gym around here too, a couple of them that did the same, almost the same thing, if not the same or damn near close. We just went on the format of, eat real food.
Yep.
Don't eat a ton of it. Don't eat too much. We use trays. I think it was actually, I'm trying to think where I say it was Tori actually at New England who I'm like, hey, what are you using for trays? I had seen something. We use trays to portion it out. So similar to what you just said,
Completely.
mostly
Yep.
vegetables. Our challenge also included a sleep format and a workout point. But
Exactly.
hindsight, we'd actually probably take away the workout point because we had people just realizing they were hammering the gym 7 days a week for that point. But
Yeah.
honestly, it was the best challenge we have done as far as results were concerned. And even more importantly, just like you said, the 30 days after, the 60 days, I mean, for us, 6 months later, we're still seeing that lifestyle as being something sustainable.
Right.
There's still a lot of people, they got away from the trays and then
Yep.
realized that the trays were that much easier for them to actually just kind of continue on with. So they just bought the trays off Amazon, continuing a
Yep.
lot of their meal prep with those trays. And it was, honestly, it worked out really well. It's kind of like become, I guess, the foundation nutritionally from when we're just taking newer folks and they're like, what do I dive into? We're like, start with this,
Right.
real basic. Like, let's clean everything up from a very simple approach, just
Yeah.
not snacking all day, eating 3 to 4 trays, depending on their body weight and where they were.
Yep.
we almost, in that challenge, we actually cut out supplements, like as far as protein was concerned. And this was only based on
Yeah,
somewhat of a
totally.
body fat gauge. If someone was at 30% body fat, we weren't truly concerned about them shoveling in protein shakes and meal replacements. We're like, stick to the meals. Let's see
Completely.
what's happening. And it was really good across the board. And then vice versa. We had a lot of folks who were like, listen, I want to do the challenge from a quality standpoint, but I'm not looking to lose weight. They were very lean. So for them, we're like, okay, protein shake, normal stuff, and so forth. But that was, it was by far our best challenge. So we're actually going to do another one coming up, and we were trying to figure out ways to kind of build on that. But it worked so well. And I think it's an easier base to start with before people. I think the next step for those folks is honestly to dive into, calculating macros, diving in a little bit further of like exactly how you're eating, breaking it down, and then making changes there. That should be step 2, in my opinion.
I think so. There's a couple of things that I think you did right, which, one is, keeping it simple, focusing on real foods. Like there was a study that was published recently, and I think that the title of it is like ultra processed diets cause excess calorie intake and weight gain. And basically what they tried to say was like, if you just take people and force them to eat real food, they will naturally calorically restrict in a way that's healthy and beneficial, right? Not in a way that's, overly restrictive. The second thing I think you guys said were right was implement other aspects. One of the things that when we've talked about designing nutritional challenges for gym, we say, look, you got to give people other things to focus on besides just nutrition. So this becomes sort of like a lifestyle change, right? So like we've already talked about sleep. So we would say, in week 1, in addition to, hitting your nutritional goals, we want you guys to give yourself, points for your sleep. And so the most points you can get is 8 hours, 8 points. So if you sleep 8 hours, you get 8 points. If you sleep 7, you get 7, etc.
Yeah.
In week 2, we were like, okay, we want you to make sure that, when you leave the gym, you just don't go sit at your computer desk all day, because realistically, if I've got you for an hour a day and then you go sit in front of your laptop for 9, it's going to be really hard to generate physical changes. So we say, we want you to get somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 steps a day as like our week 2 challenge. Week 3 could be journaling, like we just talked about, etc. So those are really, really nice things to like add on because you kind of create.
Yeah, I like the simples. That's exactly what we're looking for this next one. Was kind of like not just from a nutritional standpoint, but almost a lifestyle change. Right. And that, how do you intertwine that in? And that's actually really good. The journal, for instance, I've always had that conversation one-on-one, but we haven't rolled that out to the masses. But that would be, talk about changing lifestyles is introducing this journal, which is like super cheap on Amazon. A lot of people view it as very silly, but I've yet to meet someone that actually continued to do it and stayed consistent with it that didn't reap the benefits of it. So kind of like hence the challenge, reading a book, whatever it may be. But that's very cool. Yeah, rolling that stuff out with the to make it more of a lifestyle change than just nutritional.
Completely. And I think, like you were mentioning, like what's the next step for these people? And it really comes down to each person's individual goals, right? So if somebody's desire is to be, very healthy, and realistically, I don't think necessarily tracking macros is probably the right path for them. Maybe for like a month, just so that they can get a true sense of what proportions are. Like I like to tell this story. I had one client, she came to me, she was really, struggling to lose weight. And I said, okay, let's just, get a sense of what you're doing day to day. And day 1, it was like she went to go plug in her coffee that she'd been having every morning from Dunkin' Donuts for the last 5 years. And it was like a 570 calorie coffee. And I was like, well, Katie, here's the problem. And she was like, oh, that's easy. And I was like, yeah, so tracking even in a very short term can sometimes be eye opening as to sort of what's actually in your food. But, if you want to take body composition or performance or your health even to like the highest level, then applying some metric of, weighing and measuring is going to be a helpful thing to do, at least for some length of time.
Yep.
It's sort of like going into the gym. It's like, if I was to go into the gym with Brandon and we just started throwing weights on the bar, could we get a pretty good workout in? Yeah, we absolutely could. But if we really want to make like elite level progress, have consistent gains for a relatively long period of time, there needs to be some structure to it. And I think the diet is the same exact thing. Can you get really great results with 80% focus on your nutrition and not ever weigh and measure anything? Absolutely. But if you want to take things to a sort of elite level or a higher level, then like applying some focus and some metrics to it is going to be necessary.
Agreed. Yeah. It's funny because I only recently, so I've kind of always followed suit with that. And it probably just simply stems from so many conversations with you, but I
Hmm.
never, not that I say it's a bad thing. If someone wants to track their food every day for the rest of their life, by all means, but I'm usually like, hey, do it for, 3 to 4 weeks, if not less, just get a gauge. But it's
Hmm.
funny because I did my numbers with you so many times over the years. They've never really changed per se. They've always been the same and, close,
Roughly.
roughly around the same. So for me, I'd hit them for a week or two. I'd be pretty good. Well, only recently, granted, I went on a hiatus of even training for a long time, just, not as consistent and so forth. But recently, maybe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I did an entire week and I generally eat the same thing. I'm not that
Hmm.
far off. So what I found was for somehow, some way, I still yet to really contribute it to I look back in like the old journal and stuff I used to eat and where my numbers were. I remember contacting you and be like, man, I cannot hit these fat numbers. I'm like way over it. Like, this is really difficult to eat this low of fat. And then, but everything else, protein, I was high and everything else. Now, whatever has changed, I don't know. My fat for a few weeks was never over. I'm like, huh, that's strange. I know that was always an issue. My carbs were like right on. It was the protein. I was
Hmm.
substantially low on protein. And one
Yeah.
thing is I stopped. I really wasn't doing shakes. I was just focused on eating. I wasn't really
Yeah.
focused on supplementation of any sort, really. So that didn't help. But then I think it was just mindset from, again, working out 1 to 2 times a day, doing random stuff that I was doing without even realizing it for those weeks and those times in the past when I've kept track. I was adding in that shake or two or this product or this that helped. And all of a sudden you fast forward and I did it a few weeks ago and I'm like, holy crap, I'm substantially under on my protein. So even
Yeah.
if it's just for our folks, I'm like, yeah, get a gauge. And then if you're eating the same thing and you're meal prepping every week, yeah, don't stress about it. But once in a while, especially if you're saying, hey, my performance is down, I'm feeling
Yep.
soft, something's off. Okay, go back to keeping track for a week or two. See if you're like, holy shit, that is way off.
Oh yeah,
And
man.
that's where I
I mean,
was. I'm like, wow, can't believe my protein is so low. That's an issue.
even for me, like, you know, I do this stuff for a living, and so, you know, there are weeks that I'll track, and there are weeks and sometimes months where I don't. But it's interesting. I'm always sort of playing the game in my head of like, okay, that's probably 300 grams, and so when I start to redial things in and start to pay closer attention, it's often shocking to me at how wrong my mental scale can be. What I thought was 6 ounces ends up being like 9 ounces, and I'm like, okay, like yeah, this is a sign. It's time to kind of pay attention to things for a week or two here, recalibrate that scale a little bit, and then we can maybe move away from sort of the intense tracking. So yeah, even someone who's supposed to be an absolute pro at this still struggles with that sort of like, hey, you know what? That 8 ounces of rice there, that looks pretty good. When in actuality, it's like 12. And I'm just hungry. So
At M2 Performance Nutrition, it looks like you have different tiers for people depending on their
yeah,
what level they're looking for, what support they're looking for. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
yeah, for sure. So we originally started out with just sort of one-on-one coaching. I think it's the best path forward for success. But we ended up creating two additional sort of programs that are self-led. And the reason we did that is twofold. One is there's some people out there that really just don't need somebody in their life to kind of make things happen. Like these people are like the oddities and the exceptions where I'm like, hey, I want you to hit 200 grams of protein, 85 grams of fat, and 350 grams of carbs, and I want you to do it, every day for the next 2 weeks. And you can look at their food log, and they'll have done it every day, even if I've never messaged them once. Like realistically, those people just need a nutrition plan, and then they're going to go off and do their thing and probably see really good success. Um, so that plan was kind of created for those people. And then honestly, there's some people that really want to learn about nutrition, but just can't quite afford one-on-one coaching. Our service, our company sort of approach to nutrition coaching is extremely involved. We're text messaging with clients at least 3 days a week. We're there to answer their questions, pretty much any time of the day. And so, we charge for that service because we do believe it's some of the best, if not the best in the industry out there. And so having a cheaper option where somebody can say, hey, I know I know I want to pay attention to my nutrition. I think I have an idea of how to make this work. I just don't even know where to begin with what I should be eating from macros. That's an approach for the self-led programs as well. So that's really the sort of the core heart of what those are designed to be. Tier 2 is only different from Tier 1 in the sense that we had so many people coming back to us and saying, the macros that you made me are great, we're loving them, but my training has changed. I'm getting ready for a competition, and I really want to know what I should be doing because I've increased my training by an hour a day. Or, conversely, it was the end of the regional season and they'd say, I'm backing off on my training. Can you give me a nutritional approach for what my time off should be? Right. And so we dissolved this Tier 2 program where people can kind of basically pre-purchase future adjustments to their macros, essentially at a slightly discounted price.
And then you have that Tier 3 where it's much more involved, like
you said. Yeah, the one-on-one coaching. Yeah, so Tier 3 is one-on-one coaching. The basics of this program is, so you're going to get that's roughly the same nutritional plan that you would get with Tier 1 or Tier 2, but then the coach is going to try to do as much work for you as possible. So this is an approach that kind of spun out of my work with Mackenzie Riley. So Mackenzie's poised to qualify for her third individual and I think fourth or fifth CrossFit Games overall. So I started working with her maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, and up until that point, I kind of messaged my clients by email like once a week or so, checking their food logs and stuff. And Mackenzie was, totally different. She'd be buzzing me on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, just sort of like asking questions and things. But sure enough, I'd go to look at her food logs and they were always consistent. And so actually, it's sort of funny. I started to spin this approach and use it with Tasia. As a nutrition client, a lot of times life gets busy. And so if I have a check-in with you on Friday, I might look at your food log on Wednesday, and Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday are all empty. But magically on Friday, all of those things will appear filled. Right. And that's not necessarily the best way to go through. But now if you know that your coach is going to proactively look at your food log every day of the week, you really can't get away with that anymore. And so, I started just, paying attention to Tasia and some other, clients, food log way more proactively, messaging them at least 3 days a week with, hey, the food logs look good. And so now they knew I was looking. They weren't having to go log things in some, online Excel document or anything. So the amount of work that they had to do to kind of track their nutrition was dramatically reduced. And sure enough, like our results started to go through the roof. And so that's really the core of our one-on-one nutrition co-programming. We're going to be really proactive in your life. We're going to get involved. We're going to ask questions about how your relationships are. We're going to ask about your sleep at least once a week, because all of those things ultimately impact your nutrition. And so they really are not necessarily our job to solve, but we have to at least be there to listen to them and be aware of what's going on with them in your life.
Absolutely. It sounds like a whole athlete approach.
Yeah.
If people want to find out more, where should they go?
Yeah, for sure. So the best place to check us out is the website, M2PerformanceNutrition.com. It's actually undergoing a complete rebuild right now to kind of more represent the diverse population of people that we work with beyond just the elite athletes. And then, I would definitely recommend checking out our Instagram page, which is just the same thing, M2Performance Nutrition. There's a lot of sort of diverse things on there. Like we just posted a story today about a client, a year-long transformation, and she did a really great job with it. It was basically her upside down in the handstand position, and you can see the insane, dramatic physical transformation that she's made, but also in the writing down below is sort of the mental and emotional transformation that she made as well, which honestly I think is really what separates us from other companies out there. So there's some really cool stories on the Instagram page as well to go check out.
Well, we'll send people that way. Brandon, you have anything else?
No, that's it, man. Appreciate your time, Mike.
Hey, anything. I always say that I owe a lot to the New Hampshire CrossFit community and, Brandon early on, and kind of not only introducing me to his number of his athletes, but giving me an opportunity to come down and, do a seminar at his place really early on. So thank you to you. And
texting him daily, telling him to go full time.
he was behind that. It took me a little while to kind of believe in the whole thing, that it was actually a reality. But Yeah, the side gig turned into the full gig, man. That's for sure.
Yeah, that growth has been amazing to watch. I know it's funny because we, like you said, so many people even within our walls, we have a ton of people that work with you guys now, and just it'll randomly get brought up or be like, oh, I got this template, and it's funny when to think of that, like back when it was just a few, and then it's like now, like you said, 500. It's crazy. The growth is amazing. So
it's been a wild ride, and I can't wait for the next ride myself. So awesome.
Well, good luck the rest of the way. I hope we have continued success. Again, it sounds like you're doing amazing, and sounds like Brandon's, as hard as it to say, Brandon was right.
Yeah. I said, I'm like, I think there's a shout out somewhere on there.
I don't think we can end with that, but I'm going to let it happen anyways. He was right. He was right for once.
I'm taking it.
Yeah, man. Thanks, guys, so
awesome.
much.
Thanks for your time, Mike.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Complete Athletic Performance Podcast with BP and me, Chris Anderson. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave a positive review. You can also follow us on YouTube and on Instagram at Complete Athletic Performance. For more information on CAP, affiliate programming, and individual programming, head over to CompleteAthleticPerformance.com.